Well, hello there, and welcome back to another edition of Viper Bites Primetime Preview, Thursday Night Football to kick off week number 10, a matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Miami Dolphins. But before we get into the tail of the tape, a little housekeeping is in order. Make sure if you're watching here on the Vipers Network on YouTube to hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us on any of our podcasting platforms, whether that be Apple or Spotify or Anchor, make sure to hit that rate and review right now. I can wait. Okay, I'm not going to wait that long. And if you've got questions, hit me up on Twitter at MattDonnellyFF or slide into the comments section here on the YouTube. Drop those comments, and I'll get those answered as soon as possible. Now, without further ado, let's get to what you came for, and that's that preview, starting off with the Baltimore Ravens and starting off, even more importantly, with that quarterback position with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson was a QB1 last week, posting 32.6 fantasy points against the Minnesota Vikings while throwing for 266 yards and 3 touchdowns while adding an additional 120 yards on the ground. Now imagine what he would have done production-wise if it wasn't for those 2 interceptions. He trails only Tom Brady by a mere 3 points for the top spot overall when it talks about the fantasy football plethora of quarterbacks. You know what I'm saying? He is right there. He is that QB2 right now. Now, remember when Jackson was the league MVP? Well, I've got news for y'all. He's even a better quarterback today than he was then. And yes, guess what? He can come back from a game being down by multiple double-digit points based on what he can do with that arm. Now, he's got more weapons than maybe he's had in the past there. Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman. You know I love myself some Rashad Bateman. More on that a little bit later. But my baseline for a solid start is a quarterback that gets 17 fantasy points, and he has accomplished that in 7 of 8 games, and he's gone over 30 points in 3 of those contests. Miami is in the middle of the pack when it comes to allowing fantasy points to the quarterback position, ranking in at number 18 while allowing 17.17 fantasy points per game. They're also allowing the 13th most passing yards per game, or passing yards throughout the season with 2,528. And here's the kicker. They've allowed the 3rd most passing touchdowns this year. This is looking very favorable to Lamar Jackson and maybe a couple of his weapons here. Now, we're going to talk about those weapons, but first we have to talk about that running back position. We know that Lamar is the straw that stirs the drink, especially when it comes to the running game. But there's Devonta Freeman, there's Le'Veon Bell, and with Murray out last week, it was Freeman who saw 58% of the snaps against the Vikings, but Bell still saw 23%. Tyson Williams, he factored in, he saw 18% of those snaps. Now, Murray is trending towards missing his 3rd straight contest, which means Freeman, right? Well, Tyson Williams was the guy until he wasn't. Latavius Murray was the guy until he wasn't. Do you really want to invest in Devonta Freeman stock? Well, Freeman did outsnap Le'Veon Bell 57-23. It was Bell who had 3 red zone carries to Freeman's 2. Freeman did finish with 79 yards rushing and added in a little bit of receiving there, had a touchdown, placed in the top 10 fantasy rankings amongst running backs last week. But I'm going to pump those brakes here a little bit because with Miami, I think there's going to be a limitation on what he can do as they're allowing the 2nd fewest points per game at 15.65 to running backs. And that seems to be the strength of this team, while they've allowed the 6th fewest rushing yards and only 2 touchdowns on the ground. So I'm going to favor the Miami defense when it comes to the run game. And I'm probably going to avoid all Ravens running backs in this contest. Now, what I'm not going to avoid are the pass catchers. And that starts with Marquise Hollywood Brown. He can hold on to that wide receiver Ravens status for now, but there is a day coming for Rashad Bateman. Don't you worry, it's coming. And as good as the Dolphins have been against the run for fantasy, they've had their struggles against receivers, and they are allowing 40.93 fantasy points per contest. Okay, they're also allowing the 5th most yards to receivers, 707, and the 3rd most touchdowns, 5. Marquise Brown, give him a little bit of respect on here. He is 16th in receptions with 46, 7th in touchdowns with 7, and 6th in yards with 682. And this, you put that all together, you mash it up, throw in the blender, that adds up to the wide receiver 6 for all of fantasy. He is averaging 18.8 points per contest and is coming off a 20-point performance last week. Now, Brown has logged at least 19 fantasy points in 6 of the last 8 games and has seen double-digit targets in 3 of the last 4 contests. Last week, 9 receptions on 12 targets, 116 yards. Good luck, Miami. Fun fact, Marquise Brown, he went to the same junior college as Vipercast host Major Caldwell. Congratulations. Now, that other wide receiver that I love to talk about, Rashad Bateman is that dude. And sooner or later, you should just get used to it right now. Bateman is averaging 9.4 fantasy points per game, but that chemistry with Jackson continues to grow each and every week. In 3 games, Bateman has seen 6 or more targets in each contest. Last week, Bateman ran 31 routes on 61 snaps while being targeted 8 times. Now, if I punch this into my calculator, that adds up to about nearly 26% of the times that he runs a route, Lamar Jackson is going to be looking for him. The snaps, 66%. The routes, 82%. The targets, 8, were all season highs last week. I feel like the John Wick meme here. Yeah, he's back. Now, Mark Andrews, we're talking about the tight end position here. Mark Andrews faces the 21st ranked fantasy defense against tight ends, a defense that has been allowing 13.83 fantasy points per game so far this season. While they have been allowing some yardage, 333, they have yet to allow a touchdown to the position, and Andrews has 3 such touchdowns, but they all came back between weeks 5 and week 6. Andrews has at least 5 targets in every game this season and has been targeted 7 times or more in 5 of the last 6 games, leading to 40 or more receiving yards in all but 1 game this year. In fact, he has 5 or more receptions in 6 of the last 7 contests and is currently the second highest scoring tight end in fantasy with 120 points, which puts him 14 behind Travis Kelce and 9 ahead of the Dolphins' Mike Geskicki. More on him a little bit later. Now, those 120 points have him ranked as wide receiver 25, if anyone's keeping track at home about that value of the tight end to the wide receiver position. Now, we're going to kick this over to South Beach. We're going to go to the Miami Dolphins, and we're going to talk a little bit about Tua Tagovailoa and a little bit about Jacoby Brissett. Will Tua be available for this one? After being a surprise scratch last week, word on them Twitter streets is Tua wanted to play last week, but he was limited. And with a short week, chances of him starting this one are looking less and less favorable as the week progresses. It's Wednesday. It wasn't looking good. Chances are Thursday, things aren't going to improve that much. So enter another week of Jacoby Brissett, who seems to be the kiss of death when it comes to quarterback positions lately. Wherever he goes, he manages to find some kind of opportunity to inject himself into the lineup at some point or another. If Brissett is under center, it'll be the 6th time this season in which he saw significant action, and he has only recorded 17 or more fantasy points 1 time. The Ravens rank 25th in fantasy points per game allowed to quarterbacks, allowing 10.74 on average. What scares me is the Dolphins have the top 3 offensive linemen in the entire league at allowing quarterback pressures, as Austin Jackson, Liam Eichenberg, and Jesse Davis have each allowed 37 pressures. That is not good, no matter how you look at it. Now, at the running back position, Myles Gaskin, not Myles Gaskins, Myles Gaskin. Look, it appears as though the Dolphins believe Myles Gaskin once again. Last week, Gaskin saw an 89% opportunity share to go along with a 15% target share, but only managed to produce 57 scrimmage yards with 26 touches against a poor Texans team. The Ravens are 24th in the league in fantasy points per game allowed to the running backs, allowing 26.4 per game. And let's be honest, it's just really Gaskin back there. Now, the Ravens have allowed the 7th fewest rushing yards to backs, but they've allowed the 7th most receiving yards to the position, which happens to feed into what Gaskin does best for this Dolphins team. Jaylen Waddle. Waddle is dang near matchup proof. It doesn't hurt when he gets his target as often as he does. In 9 games thus far, Waddle has been targeted 78 times. That makes him this 9th most targeted player in the league. And he is the wide receiver 23 in PPR scoring. Let's rewind that back. The 9th most targeted player. He's a rookie, remember. 9th most targeted player. Now, Baltimore has tightened things up against the pass in recent weeks and has more of a respectable 18th in the league when it comes to allowing fantasy points to the wide receiver position. That has now come down to about 34.27 points per game and pretty much in the middle of the pack when it comes to yards allowed and touchdowns surrendered. Regardless of whoever's under center, They will be looking Waddle's way more often than not, who's recorded double-digit fantasy production in 5 of his first 9 career games and double-digit targets in 3 of the last 4 contests. Now, as far as the other wide receiver position goes, Devontae Parker, hamstring. Will Fuller, finger. They will be missing in action yet again. So what does that leave us? It leaves us with Matt Collins, who had 3 catches for 22 yards and a touchdown last week. And I may add, he was the wide receiver 21 with 8.2 fantasy points. And you know what? He's got touchdowns in 2 of the last 3 games. Okay, maybe even a little Kirk Merritt will jump in there, who had 1 catch for 13 yards back in week 9. You know what? Let's really hope that Preston Williams is available in this one, because I don't want to go that much deeper into the depth chart there for the Dolphins. But what I can trust is their tight end, Mike Geskicki. Keep the good times going with Mike Geskicki. The Ravens are allowing the 5th most points to tight ends this season, averaging 17.17 per game, and have allowed 3 touches. So, that doesn't sound like much, but only the Eagles and the Chiefs have allowed more to date. Geskicki finds himself 3rd among tight ends in fantasy production, posting 110.9 points in 9 games. And since week 2, he has seen at least 6 targets in every game, with the exception of the week 8 contest against the Buffalo Bills, where he saw 4. In fact, he has 40 or more receiving yards in every single one of those games. You can trust in Mike Geskicki. I do. With that being said, make sure to take a moment, head over to fantasypoints.com. Hit that, go subscribe to what they've got going on there. Use promo code 21Vipers10. That will get you 10% off. They've already cut the price down right now as it's halfway through the season. So you're going to get a good opportunity to get good value the rest of the season. And trust me, you won't regret it. Also, head over to the Vipers Network here. If you're listening on the podcast here, check out our weekly previews there with Tara and Major. And you know what? I just dropped on my starts and sits. I just dropped off my waivers. We've got the Sunday Night Football and the Monday Night Football previews coming up later this week. Make sure to check those out. With that being said, you know what? Keep it prime time.